I used to think enlightenment meant letting go of everything. I never thought it meant someone else would be watching me do it. The worst part isn't that I was being recorded, it's that I paid for the privilege, thinking I was buying my freedom. Some lessons cost you money, others cost you your dignity. This one cost me both. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our longtime viewers, and he wanted his experience heard. My name is Douglas, and I'm 63 years old. 3 years ago, I thought I'd found paradise in Phuket. I'd been planning my escape from Phoenix for months after my divorce finalized. The settlement left me with enough money to live simply somewhere warm, and Thailand seemed like the perfect place to start over. I wasn't looking for bars or beaches. I was looking for meaning. The meditation retreats, the Buddhist temples, the whole spiritual scene, that's what drew me to Phuket. I'd been reading about mindfulness and Eastern philosophy since my marriage fell apart, trying to make sense of where my life had gone wrong. Juanita found me on my third day there. I was sitting alone at a vegetarian cafe near Wat Chalong, reading a book about meditation, when she approached my table. She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and this gentle way of speaking that made you want to listen. "You are studying Buddhism?" she asked, pointing to my book. I nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Trying to learn. I teach meditation," she said. "Small groups, very peaceful. Maybe you would like to join." That's how it started. Not with romance or attraction, but with what I thought was a genuine spiritual connection. Juanita ran what she called a mindfulness community, a group of mostly Western expats who met regularly for meditation, vegetarian meals, and discussions about Buddhist philosophy. The group met at her house, a beautiful traditional Thai home about 20 minutes from Patong Beach. The first time I visited, I was struck by how peaceful it felt. Incense burning, soft music, meditation cushions arranged in a circle. There were usually 6 or 7 of us, mostly men my age, who'd come to Thailand seeking something more than just cheap beer and easy living. Juanita would guide us through breathing exercises, share Buddhist teachings, and cook elaborate vegetarian meals afterward. She never asked for money directly, but there was always a donation bowl, and it seemed natural to contribute. We were getting so much value from these sessions. "Douglas," she said to me after the third meeting, "you have very good energy, very open heart. I think you could go deeper in your practice." I felt proud, chosen. After 30 years of marriage where I felt invisible, someone was seeing something special in me. Within a month, I was attending every session. Juanita would often pull me aside afterward for private conversations about my spiritual progress. "You are different from the others," she would say. "They come here to escape. You come here to find yourself." I ate it up. Every word felt like validation I'd been craving for years. She started offering me private meditation instruction. "Some teachings are not for groups," she explained. "They require trust, privacy. Are you ready for this level of commitment?" Of course, I was ready. I'd driven myself to Phoenix every day for 20 years, selling insurance to people who didn't want it, coming home to a wife who barely looked up from her phone. This felt like the first real thing I'd done in decades. "There is a small room available in my compound," Juanita mentioned during one of our private talks, "for serious students only. You would have your own space for meditation, and I could guide your practice more closely." The rent she quoted was reasonable, and the idea of having my own spiritual sanctuary was irresistible. I moved in 2 weeks later. The room was simple but comfortable: a bed, a small desk, and most importantly, a dedicated meditation area with cushions and a beautiful Buddha statue. "This room has very good energy," Juanita assured me as she showed me around. "Many students have had breakthrough experiences here." The compound housed 4 other residents, all Western men in their 50s and 60s, who'd come to Thailand for spiritual reasons. We'd nod to each other in the shared kitchen, but Juanita discouraged too much socializing between residents. "Each person's journey is unique," she explained. "Too much talking with others can create confusion, comparing your progress to theirs. Better to focus inward. It made sense to me. I was here to find myself, not to make friends. The meditation sessions continued, but now I had additional private instruction in my room. Juanita would visit every few days to guide me through what she called advanced practices. These sessions were different from the group meditations, more intense, more personal. Close your eyes, she would instruct. Let go of all self-consciousness. True enlightenment requires complete vulnerability. I would sit in meditation for an hour or more while she remained silent in the corner, occasionally offering gentle guidance. Feel your breath, Douglas. Let every wall come down. You are safe here. I trusted her completely. The other residents seemed nice enough, but there was something secretive about them. They would disappear into their rooms for long periods, and when they emerged, they looked drained, almost hollow. They are working through deep spiritual blocks, Juanita explained when I mentioned this. It is normal to feel tired when old patterns are being released. I assumed I would go through the same process as my practice deepened. My daily routine became centered around meditation and spiritual study. I would wake early, meditate in my room for an hour, join the group session if there was one, then spend the afternoon reading Buddhist texts or practicing mindful walking in the compound's garden. Juanita encouraged this intensive schedule. You are making such beautiful progress, Douglas. I have never seen someone embrace the teaching so completely. Her approval meant everything to me. But the more time I spent in the compound, the more I began to notice things that didn't quite add up. Juanita seemed to know details about my private habits that I'd never shared with her. During our sessions, she would make comments like, "I can see you had trouble sleeping last night. Your energy is scattered." Or, "You were very restless during your morning meditation. What was disturbing your peace?" At first, I thought she was just incredibly intuitive, reading my subtle body language or energy. Isn't that what spiritual teachers were supposed to do? How do you know these things about me? I asked her once. She smiled mysteriously. When you open your heart to the universe, Douglas, the universe speaks back. I am simply listening. It sounded profound, so I didn't question it further. But the feeling of being somehow observed grew stronger. Sometimes I would be alone in my room and get the distinct sensation that someone was watching me. I would look around, check the windows, but there was never anyone there. Juanita began discouraging me from maintaining contact with the outside world. Your energy is very sensitive right now, she said. Contact with people who don't understand your spiritual path can create disruption, confusion. Better to focus completely on your inner work. When I mentioned missing calls from my daughter back in Phoenix, Juanita looked concerned. Family members often resist when we begin to change. They want to keep us small, familiar. This is a crucial time in your development. Douglas, don't let outside influences derail your progress. I started screening my calls, eventually stopping them altogether. My daughter left increasingly worried voicemails, but Juanita assured me this was normal. Those who truly love us will understand and support our growth. If they cannot do this, perhaps the relationship was not as healthy as we believed. It felt harsh, but also liberating. For the first time in my life, I was putting my own spiritual development first. The financial demands began gradually. Juanita mentioned special meditation equipment that would enhance my practice, expensive cushions blessed by monks, crystals with specific vibrational properties, books and audio recordings that weren't available to the general public. These tools are investments in your enlightenment, she explained. You cannot put a price on spiritual growth. Each purchase felt justified. What was a few $100s compared to the peace and understanding I was gaining? Then came the private intensive sessions. You are ready for deeper work, Juanita announced one evening. But this level of teaching requires significant preparation on my part. I must charge a small fee to cover the sacred materials and my time. The fee wasn't small, $500 per session, but I paid it gladly. These intensive sessions took place in my room, with Juanita guiding me through complex visualization exercises and breathing techniques. "Remove all your clothing," she instructed during my first intensive session. "True spiritual work requires complete vulnerability. You must be willing to shed every layer of protection, every barrier to your authentic self." I hesitated, but she spoke with such authority, such spiritual certainty. "This is how it has been done for thousands of years, Douglas. If you cannot trust the process, you cannot receive its benefits." So I complied, sitting naked in meditation, while she guided me through what she called ego dissolution exercises. It felt uncomfortable at first, but Juanita's voice was so soothing, so confident. "Feel your shame leaving your body," she would say. "These feelings of self-consciousness are just social conditioning. You are releasing lifetimes of repression." After an hour of this intensive work, I did feel different, raw, exposed, but somehow cleaner. "You are making such beautiful progress," she assured me as I got dressed. "Most students take months to reach this level of trust." The other residents seemed to be going through similar intensives. I would sometimes hear Juanita's voice through the thin walls, offering the same kind of guidance to them. But they looked increasingly withdrawn, almost haunted. "Spiritual transformation is not always comfortable," Juanita explained when I mentioned their appearance. "They are releasing very old, very deep patterns. It can be exhausting work." I assumed I would start looking the same way as my own work deepened. One evening, I encountered Klaus, the German man who lived in the room next to mine. He was making tea in the shared kitchen, and for the first time in months, we had an actual conversation. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Almost a year," he replied, his voice hollow. "And you? Are you finding what you're looking for?" There was something in his tone that made me uncomfortable. "I think so," I said. "Juanita is an amazing teacher." Klaus paused, his teacup halfway to his lips. "Is she?" he asked quietly. "Douglas, have you ever noticed anything unusual about this place?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "The way she knows things about us, things she shouldn't know. Have you ever felt like you're being watched?" My heart began beating faster. Sometimes, yes. But she says it's just spiritual sensitivity." Klaus shook his head slowly. "Spiritual sensitivity doesn't tell you what someone did in their private room at 3 a.m. He finished his tea quickly and started to leave, then turned back. "Be careful, Douglas. Be very careful." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Klaus's words kept echoing in my mind, mixing with all the small doubts I'd been pushing away. The next morning, Klaus was gone. His room was empty, cleaned out completely. "Where is Klaus?" I asked Juanita during our morning session. She looked serene, unbothered. "Klaus was not ready for true enlightenment," she said simply. "Some people reach a point in their spiritual journey where fear takes over. They run back to their old lives rather than face the truth about themselves." Her explanation felt reasonable, but something in her tone bothered me. "Did he say goodbye to anyone?" I pressed. "He seemed upset when I talked to him yesterday." Juanita's expression shifted slightly, became cooler. "Douglas, you are letting your mind create stories, distractions. This is exactly what I warned you about, allowing doubt to poison your practice. Klaus left because he chose fear over growth. Do not make the same mistake." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started paying closer attention to details I'd previously ignored. The way Juanita would sometimes reference things that had happened in my room when she wasn't there. The small holes in the walls that I'd assumed were just part of the old building's character. The fact that she always seemed to know my schedule, my routines, even when I changed them unexpectedly. "You meditated for an extra 30 minutes this morning," she mentioned during one session. "I could feel your energy shifting. What insight were you receiving?" How could she feel my energy? From her house. How could she know I'd meditated longer, unless she was somehow monitoring me? I started changing my routine deliberately, meditating at different times, moving my cushions to different positions in the room. Without fail, Juanita would comment on these changes the next day. "Your energy was scattered yesterday afternoon. Were you feeling restless?" Or, "I sense some resistance in your practice. What was troubling you?" The intensive sessions continued, but now I participated with growing unease. As I sat naked in meditation, following Juanita's instructions to release all barriers, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched by more than just her. Sometimes I would open my eyes during the session and catch her looking at something other than me, a quick glance toward the wall, toward the Buddha statue, toward corners of the room where shadows gathered. "Why do you keep looking around during our sessions?" I finally asked her. She seemed surprised by the question. "I am monitoring your energy, Douglas, watching for signs of resistance or breakthrough. A good teacher must observe their student carefully." It sounded plausible, but something about her answer felt rehearsed, too smooth. I started conducting little tests. I would speak aloud in my room when I was alone, saying things like, "I'm thinking about leaving Thailand soon," or "I miss my old life in Phoenix." Without fail, Juanita would address these topics in our next session. "I sense some homesickness in your energy. Remember, attachment to your old life will hold back your spiritual progress." The correlation was too consistent to be coincidence. One afternoon, while Juanita was away from the compound, I decided to investigate my room more thoroughly. I moved the meditation cushions, examined the walls more carefully, looked behind pictures and decorations. Most of what I found seemed innocent enough: old screw holes, water stains, the normal wear and tear of an older building. But when I moved the Buddha statue from its shelf to dust underneath it, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a small hole in the wall behind the statue, just large enough for a camera lens. The hole was perfectly positioned to have a clear view of my meditation area, my bed, the entire room. I stared at it in disbelief, my mind racing. This couldn't be what I thought it was. There had to be another explanation. Maybe it was just a hole from old wiring or a previous repair job. But as I examined it more closely, I could see it was too clean, too perfectly round. And when I looked at the Buddha statue more carefully, I noticed it had been positioned to block the hole from casual view, but not from whatever might be on the other side. My hands were shaking as I put the statue back in place. Everything Klaus had said came flooding back. The way Juanita knew intimate details about my private moments, the feeling of being watched, the intensive sessions where she insisted I be completely vulnerable. I had been recording myself in my most private, spiritual moments, thinking I was achieving enlightenment. Someone had been watching me meditate naked, watching me sleep, watching me live my daily life in what I thought was sacred privacy. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. I sat on my bed, staring at the innocent-looking Buddha statue, and felt my entire spiritual journey crumbling around me. When Juanita returned that evening, I was waiting for her in the common area. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled her usual serene smile. "Of course, Douglas. Is everything all right? Your energy seems very agitated." "I found the camera," I said simply. Her smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. "Camera? I don't understand." "Behind the Buddha statue in my room. The hole in the wall. I found it." For a long moment, we stared at each other in silence. Then her expression changed, became less ethereal, more calculating. "Douglas, I think you are having some kind of spiritual crisis. Sometimes when people go deep in their practice, they begin to see things that aren't there, to create paranoid fantasies." She spoke in the same soothing tone she used during meditation sessions, but now it sounded manipulative, practiced. "I'm not paranoid," I said. "I know what I found. How long have you been recording me?" She sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. "Even if there were cameras, which I'm not saying there are, they would only be there for your spiritual benefit. to help me understand your energy patterns, to monitor your progress when I'm not with you. Everything I do is for your growth. Douglas. The casual way she shifted from denial to justification was chilling. My spiritual benefit? You've been watching me shower, watching me sleep, watching me in my most private moments, and you're calling it spiritual guidance. Her mask was fully off now. You came here seeking spiritual transformation, didn't you? Well, transformation requires vulnerability. It requires letting go of ego, of shame, of the illusion of privacy. I have been helping you release these attachments. By violating my privacy, by recording me without my consent. She stood up, no longer bothering to maintain her gentle spiritual teacher persona. You paid for intensive spiritual instruction, Douglas. You signed up for deep transformation work. This is what that looks like. If you're not ready for this level of commitment, perhaps you should consider whether you're truly serious about your spiritual path. I felt sick. She was turning my own spiritual aspirations against me, making me question whether my outrage was just spiritual weakness. You're insane if you think recording someone secretly is spiritual teaching. And you're naive if you think enlightenment comes without sacrifice. She shot back. Every serious spiritual tradition has practices that challenge social conditioning. You're just proving that you're not ready for advanced work. But I was done being manipulated. I want those recordings deleted. All of them. And I'm moving out immediately. Juanita's expression became cold, calculating. That might be difficult. You see, Douglas, some very private, very intimate footage of you exists. It would be unfortunate if such material found its way onto certain websites, especially footage of you in your most vulnerable spiritual states. The threat hit me like a physical blow. She had recordings of me naked, meditating, probably in states where I looked drugged or disoriented from the intensive sessions. In the wrong context, on the wrong websites, it would look like something entirely different from spiritual practice. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting your privacy, she said smoothly. As long as you continue your spiritual work here, that footage remains safe, private. But if you cause trouble, make accusations, involve authorities, well, sometimes these things accidentally get leaked. I felt completely trapped. My search for spiritual freedom had led me into the most imprisoning situation of my life. I was being held hostage by my own desire for enlightenment, by footage of my most vulnerable moments. What do you want from me? She smiled, back to her serene spiritual teacher persona. Nothing has to change, Douglas. Continue your practice, continue your generous donations, and everything remains as it should be. You can still achieve the transformation you came here seeking. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I paced my room, acutely aware of the camera behind the Buddha statue, knowing that my distress was probably being recorded too. How many other men had been through this same nightmare? How many had discovered the cameras and been similarly trapped? I thought about Klaus's haunted expression, the way the other residents had looked drained and hollow. They weren't going through spiritual transformation, they were being systematically violated and blackmailed. I had to find out how extensive this operation was. Over the next few days, I carefully searched the common areas when Juanita was away. I found cameras everywhere in the kitchen, the meditation room, the garden areas where we did walking meditation. This wasn't just about my room. The entire compound was under surveillance. Every private moment, every vulnerable conversation, every spiritual practice had been recorded. But I also found something else. Contact information for former residents that Juanita had forgotten to dispose of. Hidden in a desk drawer were addresses and phone numbers for at least a dozen Western men who had stayed at the compound over the past 2 years. Klaus's information was there, along with others. Maybe they were experiencing the same nightmare I was. Maybe together, we could find a way out. I waited until Juanita left for one of her temple visits, then used her computer to send an encrypted message to Klaus through a secure email service. It's Douglas from the compound. I found the cameras. We need to talk. Within hours, I had a reply. I've been waiting for someone else to discover the truth. I'm gathering evidence. Are you willing to help? Klaus had been documenting Juanita's operation since he left. He had evidence of similar compounds in other parts of Thailand, all targeting Western spiritual seekers. The footage was being sold on specialized websites that catered to voyeuristic interests in watching vulnerable Western men in compromising situations. Our spiritual seeking had been turned into entertainment for perverts willing to pay premium prices for intimate footage. There are at least 20 men like us, Klaus told me during a secret phone call, all being blackmailed with footage from their spiritual practices. She targets divorced men, lonely men, men seeking meaning. She knows exactly what to offer to hook us. We weren't the first, and we wouldn't be the last unless we did something about it. But taking action meant risking the very exposure we were trying to avoid. She'll release the footage if we cause trouble, I told Klaus. That's what she's counting on, he replied. Our shame, our fear of humiliation. But that footage is already being used against us. At least if we expose her, we can stop it from happening to others. Working with Klaus and 2 other former residents, we began documenting everything. We gathered evidence of the hidden cameras, the blackmail tactics, the financial exploitation. We prepared reports for both Thai authorities and international cybercrime units. It took weeks of careful planning, but eventually we had enough evidence to proceed. The day of the raid was surreal, watching police officers search the compound, finding the extensive camera equipment, seeing Juanita arrested. It felt like justice, but also like a nightmare finally ending. She maintained her innocence until the very end, claiming the cameras were for security purposes and that all residents had consented to recording. But the evidence was overwhelming. Yet even with Juanita in custody, the damage was done. Months later, I still struggle with what happened. I came to Thailand seeking spiritual meaning and found myself victimized in the most personal way possible. My trust in spiritual teachers, in the entire concept of guided enlightenment, has been shattered. I've learned to meditate on my own, in complete privacy. But the practice is forever tainted by the memory of being watched. The hardest part is reconciling my genuine spiritual experiences with the violation that was happening simultaneously. Some of what I learned during those sessions was real, meaningful. The meditation techniques, the philosophical insights, the sense of inner peace, those weren't fake. But they were built on a foundation of exploitation and betrayal that makes them feel corrupted. I still live in Thailand, but in a different city, in a place where I know I'm truly alone when I need to be. I've found peace, but it came through facing harsh reality rather than spiritual fantasy. True enlightenment, I've learned, isn't about surrendering your boundaries to someone else's authority. It's about developing the wisdom to protect yourself while remaining open to growth. The cameras are gone, but the lesson remains. The people who promise to show you your true self are often the ones most interested in exploiting what they find. Real spiritual growth happens in safety, in privacy, in relationships built on genuine trust. Anything else isn't enlightenment, it's just another form of imprisonment dressed up in religious language. I thought I was paying for spiritual guidance. Instead, I paid for the privilege of being violated. The difference between the two is something I'll never forget, and something I hope no one else has to learn the hard way.